in the middle. So positive and negativity almost needs to come together where there's not much of a trading pattern to take place anyway.
Muddling in the middle. It's about right. We'll come back, we'll talk about Trump and Japan as well, because I'm confused. I mean, Trump said there was going to be a deal by August, and the Japanese are now saying there isn't. But well, let's save that chat, and we'll come back to it, because we're very much focused on the EU. So the next big hurdle, I guess, is who gets the top jobs in the EU. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, and Spain's acting Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, have said the top jobs in Europe must reflect the results of the parliamentary elections. The two leaders met in Paris last night to talk about the outcome of the EU vote. Mr. Macron also held a call with his German counterpart, Angela Merkel, about how the post of European Commission President should be decided. Well, let's get out to Sylvia in Brussels. And Sylvia, again, you know, we're talking about muddying the waters. If in reality they now look to select these candidates based on the election result, we're going to get a slightly different direction of travel, it seems to me, policy-wise.
Well, it's really early to tell, Jeff, and the reason is because these European elections, as you mentioned, led to a fragmented European Parliament, so there's no clear party that has won these European elections, and as a result, it's really difficult to foresee if one of these politicians that the parties put forward to be the next president of the European Commission will actually get this job. But today we'll have the first official discussion among the 28 European leaders, and perhaps we'll get a bit more color on how they're going to decide these 4 top jobs. Let me remind our viewers that Europe needs a new president of the Commission, but also of the European Council, of the European Parliament, as well as of the European Central Bank. And in these discussions that are starting officially here today, the leaders will try to strike a balance between gender, nationality and political affiliation. But there is a sense of urgency, Jeff. Different European leaders have said that they need to conclude this process as soon as possible. And one of those leaders was Chancellor Merkel. We heard from her yesterday saying that the sooner these decisions are taken, the better for the EU.
Both parties, the CDU, the CSU and the SPD, stand by the system of a leading candidate, and we will introduce this position. The European Council will take the result of the vote into account, as is stated in the Lisbon Treaty. We want to find a solution as soon as possible, as the European Parliament will meet at the beginning of July, and it would be good if we have a proposal from the European Council, so that positions can be quickly filled after that. One thing is clear, we need to be capable of acting in the EU, and the sooner we have the decision, the better it is for the future, even if the new Commission only takes office later.
So the aim is to conclude this process on June 20th. That's when the leaders will gather once again here in Brussels for a summit, and the hope is that they will be able to announce these names on that date. But I have to say that according to a European official, the discussion here tonight will only be between the 28 heads of state. There will be no advisors in the room, and that's perhaps it's to avoid any names from being leaked to the press. The big elephant in these discussions, though, is indeed the Brexit. Prime Minister Theresa May is scheduled to meet the other 28 leaders. At the moment, UK is still a full member of the EU, so the representative of the United Kingdom, in this case Theresa May, has a say in these discussions. However, having spoken with different officials from different capitals, the feeling is that Theresa May should abstain from having a strong say in these decisions. Later on, I'll be interviewing one of the Vice Presidents of the European Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis, and I'll be discussing this and as well the result of the European elections with him later today.
Terrific, Sylvia. Thank you very much indeed for that, and we're looking forward to that interview to come. Let's move on. Italian yields rose and bank stocks fell on reports the European Commission is set to take disciplinary action against Italy over its rising debt levels. According to multiple reports this morning, Brussels is likely to take steps against Rome, including a potential fine for breaking EU budget rules. The Commission is due to issue reports on member countries' public finances on June the 5th. Speaking following the EU election result, Lega leader and Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini said his party's victory is a mandate to change Brussels' budget rules.
Behind me is the established and definitive result that you can analyse and that allows me as Secretary of the League to maintain the commitment made with the Italian people, to change the balance in Europe and to change European budgetary policies. It's even more important that should another polite letter be coming, of which I can't wait to know the contents, we will respond with the same politeness, on the basis of popular consensus, saying that European insecurity and unemployment closed yesterday for us and another season has begun.
Well, let's pick up with Elias Haddad, Senior Currency Strategist for Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Good morning, Elias. Welcome very much to the programme. Let's just follow on from that lead. To what extent does the euro deserve any additional support this morning on the back of the EU election outcome?
I think the bottom line in terms of the implications of these European elections, it's relatively supportive of the euro. We still have the pro-euro parties maintaining a clear majority in the 751 seats European Parliament, albeit it's a bit more fragmented. And more importantly is that the Eurosceptic parties or the populist parties haven't really made any significant gains. They still have under 180 seats in this European Parliament. So the bottom line here is that the project or the move towards greater Eurozone integration, or the snail pace move towards greater Eurozone integration, is intact. And that is supportive for the euro.
Can we talk about timing of more political turmoil? Because on the back of the parliamentary elections, we've had a snap election called in Greece. There have been problems in Austria that may have been there prior to the parliamentary elections. Later on this year, the market is just taking its focus to Italy and saying, could there be potential for a snap election or more tension in the coalition? And Germany, is that now a ticking time bomb as well, where down the track we have a breakdown in the grand coalition? So what would you say about the timing of the risks around the euro?
That's a great question. Certainly the political dynamic in the Eurozone will continue to be a bit of a headwind to the euro. But it's important to remember that if you look at the polls and a lot of those, the Eurozone periphery, for instance, Italy, and their support for the euro has actually increased. So the risk of an anti-euro party coming into power, any of those European periphery, has significantly diminished. Now the risk in Italy is more with respect to the fiscal dynamic. Certainly if we start to see a widening in the spreads between Italy and Germany, that will be a bit of a drag for the euro. But there's two big factors that suggest to me that downside for the European currency is limited. Number one, the Eurozone has a fairly favorable balance of payments backdrop. We've got a current account surplus in excess of 2% of GDP, and that is a pretty big underpinning factor here for the euro. And secondly, well, the euro exchange rate is undervalued. It's cheap based on relative measures of prices, whether you look at from consumer prices, unit labor costs, or the GDP deflator for that matter. So for these two reasons, I think the downside for the euro is limited, despite the political uncertainty in the Eurozone.
There are two other issues here that it seems to me are relevant. One is the growth profile of Europe at the moment, which is rather lackluster. And the second one is, who is the new ECB boss? And it seems to me that if you're going to take a medium to longer term view on that, you have to take a view on who you think will be the new head of the ECB.
I think certainly, yeah, that's a fact, but at this stage it's difficult to say who will be the next leader. But more importantly, I think you were bang on there. It's the lackluster and the disappointing Eurozone growth prospect that is preventing the euro from edging higher. Now, our base case scenario is for the euro to trade higher towards 120 over the next 12 months. And one of the big reasons supporting our view is the fact that we could probably start to see some positive Eurozone economic surprises over the next 12 months.
I want to bring trade into the debate around Europe. We're going to talk trade more broadly in a moment, but when it comes to Europe, what flashed up in some of the analysis yesterday is that there is pretty common accord now in European Parliament with the pro-European parties, except on trade. That in the past the Greens have voted against some of their allies in Parliament on the trade issue, and if discussions begin with the United States, where can we see that dialogue going? If the Greens push back on environmental issues, does that mean a more hardline approach then from President Trump, which we've seen in other situations? So is that a potential threat?
Yeah, I mean, right now I think the tension between the US and the Eurozone and Europe generally on the trade front has been put on ice for the next 6 months. Clearly the threat going down the road is that tensions escalate, probably not between the US and Europe, but more probably between the US and China, and that is a big downside risk to global economic activity. Now at this stage, the US-China trade tension in terms of the drag to global growth is relatively negligible. So we're talking less than 0.1% of GDP from a level of GDP, but the risk is that those tensions escalate. And there's Trump or the Trump administration, they have the political capital to take things to the next level on the trade front. You look at the Trump administration or the Trump's popularity in a lot of the swing states, and it hasn't really deteriorated since January last year when the actual trade dispute began. And you look at Americans' view with respect to how fair or unfair China's policies, the trade policies are towards the U.S. And across the political spectrum in the U.S., most Americans, by significant margin, believe that China's trade policies towards the U.S. are unfair.
Elias, we'll come back. We'll pick up in a moment on the dollar. Let's move on. Let's just update you on the latest out of Austria. The Chancellor there, Sebastian Kurz, has been removed from office after losing a vote of no confidence. Opposition parties brought forward the motion after the leader of Kurz's coalition partner was caught on camera offering to fix government contracts. Kurz will be formally asked to step down at 11:30 CET, with elections now expected in September. Still to come, in spite of what President Trump has tweeted, there is no timetable. Japan's economy minister has played down hopes of a trade deal with the US as the president dined with the emperor.
And if you just can't get enough of Squawk Box, be sure to tune into our very own podcast. Head to cnbc.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast to have a listen and download today's episode. For our listeners out there, stick around for some more.
Discover a world of incredible places with Trailblazers. Proudly sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Nico, you've got a young family here. What sort of places do you like taking them to?
Right here.
Really?
Right here. This is where I rollerblade with my daughter. This is where we go play on the beach. And I will teach her to cycle soon here. So we're right in the spot. So my school is right above the Formula 1 paddock. So I would be able to look down.
Yeah. And
there was Jacques Villeneuve, there was Michael Schumacher, Mika Häkkinen, everybody was there. And then they would walk with their cars up to the starting grid.
That's amazing.
And yeah, that's just incredible memories, and dreaming like, wow, I wish I could be like them one day and be there one day myself.
Discover a world of incredible places with Trailblazers. Proudly sponsored by Qatar Airways.
I'd like to donate these books.
Thank you very much.
Where'd you get that book?
A man donated it.
Yes? I'm sorry, but I need to retrieve... I want to leave you looking for this. No. Thank you so much. Return the book.
On the next Managing Asia, from consumer electronics to health technology, the man behind the transformation of Royal Philips.
Rather than being a conglomerate that does a lot of things a little bit, we will narrow the focus and we will go deep on health and health technology. You need to embrace change if you want to be impactful and meaningful. The holy grail in health is to understand and detect disease much earlier.
Philips CEO Frans van Houten on the next Managing Asia.